In today's story, we talk about a racist group of boys bullying a black old man. The boys find out that this man was a karate master. Before we get started, be sure to like and subscribe to hear more stories from me. So let's really get started now. On a warm, quiet afternoon in a small suburban park, the day seemed almost perfect. The laughter of children drifted from a nearby playground, and the occasional bark of a dog punctuated the stillness. Underneath the shade of a tall oak tree sat an elderly black man on a weathered bench, engrossed in a tattered old book. His name was Cain. His clothes were simple, a plain, buttoned shirt, faded jeans, and an old hat pulled low over his brow, casting a shadow over his face. To anyone passing by, he seemed like just another old man spending a peaceful day outdoors. But nearby, a group of teenage boys stood watching him, their eyes glinting with the cruelty that had become their summer pastime. They had spent the last few weeks roaming the neighborhood, searching for anyone who appeared weak or vulnerable, easy prey. For them, tormenting others was a way to pass the time, a twisted form of amusement that gave them a sense of superiority. And today, their eyes locked on Cain, the leader of the group, a tall boy named Ryan, with a swagger in his step and arrogance in his voice, sneered as he nudged his friends. "Look at that old man. Probably doesn't even know what day it is, let alone defend himself. He's an easy target." The other boys laughed, their mocking echoing across the park. They watched the man closely, noting how he didn't even glance up from his book. To them, his lack of response was a sign of weakness, a vulnerability they were eager to exploit. "Bet he can barely walk," another boy named Justin chimed in, his voice full of contempt. "Let's go mess with him. He's not gonna do anything." Without a second thought, the boys began to move as a pack, slowly closing in on the old man like wolves circling prey. The laughter that followed them felt charged with malice, their footsteps deliberately heavy, as if to announce their approach. But Cain didn't stir. His eyes remained fixed on his book, his fingers gently turning a page, as if he were oblivious to the growing tension. The first insult came from Ryan, his voice thick with mockery. "Hey, old man, what are you reading? Can you even see those words?" He leaned in closer, making a show of squinting his eyes dramatically. "Maybe you should get back to wherever you came from." Another boy, Eric, snickered and added, "Yeah, this park isn't for people like you. Shouldn't you be somewhere else?" The group of teens burst into laughter, their racist undertones unmistakable, and the harshness of their words lingered in the air. But Cain remained unmoved. He didn't flinch, didn't look up. It was as if their taunts had no weight, like the venom in their words dissolved before it could even reach him. The boys were becoming visibly agitated. How dare he ignore them? Ryan stepped closer, emboldened by his friends watching, waiting for him to escalate things. "Hey, you think you're better than us or something? Show some respect, old man." Still, Cain didn't react. His calm demeanor only served to fuel their anger. Ryan's face twisted into a scowl. He could feel the pressure of his friends' eyes on him, egging him on. They expected him to take control, to show this old man who was in charge. Ryan wasn't about to lose face. Without warning, he raised his hand, his intention clear, to intimidate, to strike, to assert dominance. For a split second, time seemed to stand still. The other boys leaned in, their eyes wide with anticipation, ready to see the old man cower. Or worse, crumble beneath the force of Ryan's impending blow. But Cain moved with the speed and precision of lightning. Before Ryan's hand could come anywhere near him, Cain's arm shot up, his hand clamping around Ryan's wrist like a steel vice. The motion was so swift, so unexpected, that the laughter died immediately. Ryan's eyes went wide in shock, his bravado crumbling as he found himself completely immobilized. His wrist was trapped, and he couldn't move, couldn't pull away, no matter how hard he tried. The group of boys stood frozen in stunned silence. This was not what they had expected. Ryan's face drained of color as his mind struggled to process what was happening. The man they had taunted, the man they had expected to be weak and powerless, had suddenly revealed an unexpected strength. Cain finally looked up, his eyes calm but sharp as they locked onto Ryan's. There was no anger in his expression, only a quiet authority that sent a shiver down Ryan's spine. He had never felt fear like this before. Not from a look, not from a silent man sitting peacefully in a park. Yet here he was, trembling under Cain's gaze, realizing he had made a terrible mistake. Before Ryan could even stammer out a word, a voice broke the silence. "Stop right there. Do you boys know who this man is?" The voice came from an elderly man who had been walking his dog nearby. He rushed over, his face pale with urgency. His eyes were wide, recognizing Cain instantly. The boys turned toward the newcomer, confused and still shaken by what had just happened. What was going on? "This man," the elderly dog walker began, his voice trembling, "is Cain. He's not just any old man. He's a master martial artist. I trained under him years ago. He's a former champion, one of the best. If he wanted to, he could take you all down in an instant." The boys stood there in stunned silence, the weight of the words sinking in like a heavy stone. Ryan, still trapped in Cain's iron grip, began to tremble. His heart raced as panic overtook him. "I didn't know," Ryan stammered, his voice cracking. "I didn't mean to." Cain's grip loosened ever so slightly, enough for Ryan to feel the tension ease, but not enough for him to escape. Cain looked at him for a moment longer, then spoke. His voice quiet but filled with a weight that made the boys' knees weak. "You didn't know," Cain said, his tone steady. "But you acted anyway. You acted without thinking, without understanding." Ryan's breath caught in his throat, and the other boys took a step back, their faces drained of color. All of them were beginning to realize the gravity of what they had done. They had come here looking for an easy target, a man they thought was weak, someone they could bully without consequence. But they had stumbled into something far beyond their comprehension. Cain released Ryan's wrist, allowing him to stumble back into his group of friends, but the lesson was far from over. "You think it's fun," Cain continued, his voice rising just enough to hold the attention of every boy in the group. "You think it's fun to pick on people you believe are weaker than you. But what you don't understand is that you never know someone's story. You don't know what they've been through, what they've survived. And worse, you don't know what damage your ignorance can do." The boys, once full of confidence and arrogance, now stood with their heads hanging low. The reality of their actions pressed down on them, and for the first time, they were forced to confront the consequences of their behavior. Cain's eyes softened as he looked at each boy in turn. "You're young. You still have time to change. But if you continue living with hate, with this prejudice in your heart, it will destroy you, just as it's destroyed so many others before you." The older man who had rushed over now shook his head, his voice filled with a mix of disbelief and awe. "You boys are incredibly lucky that Cain didn't respond the way you expected him to. He's not just a fighter. He's a man of honor, a man who chooses to teach, not punish." The silence that followed was thick, but Cain's message had sunk in. The boys were visibly shaken, their arrogance shattered. They had learned something today that went far beyond what they had intended, a lesson in respect, humility, and the true power of understanding. Ryan, his voice barely audible, muttered, We're sorry. We didn't know." Cain nodded slowly, a faint smile on his lips as he picked up his book once again. "That's the thing about life," he said, his voice calm but filled with meaning. "You won't always know, but you can always choose how you treat others, and that choice will make all the difference." As the boys walked away, their hearts heavy with the weight of what had just happened, they couldn't shake the feeling that they had been profoundly changed. They had set out to bully a stranger, but instead, they had found a teacher, and it was a lesson they would carry with them for the rest of their lives. Weeks later, the same group of boys found themselves walking through the park again. But they weren't the same. Their conversations had changed. Their perspective had shifted. And when they saw Cain once more, sitting on that same bench, they no longer saw him as a target. They saw him as the man who had opened their eyes to a truth they had never understood. A truth that had changed them forever.